stopping by my channel again, and welcome if this happens to be your first time. I am really delighted to be joined by my friend Ray of the channel Ray of Sunlight. Is it Ray of Sunlight Reads or just Ray of Sunlight?
Ray of Sunlight is a YouTube channel, and then it has reads on it on Instagram.
Okay, maybe I was combining the two. Yes, so I will of course link Ray's channel and her Instagram down below. We have a pretty strong in the Venn diagram of our reading interest. We do have a lot of similar things, and I'd say life softening is a really common element. Kind of finding books with beauty and really in-depth characterization are things that we're both drawn towards. She has just, if you want really relaxing, balm to the soul kind of videos, I highly recommend Ray's videos. And her Vlogmas was also such a delight and just such a cozy part of my routine in December. So I am looking forward to seeing more videos from Ray in the future and hearing what your cozy things list is. So thank you for being in this cozy things chat.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. It was honestly so much fun putting this list together. I had so many more than 10 things on the list. I really had to shrink it down.
It can be a hard task, and especially because there's different kinds of cozy things you prefer if you're ill, or depending on the time of year that it is, or if you know, different things are cozy with different people or on your own. So yeah, I'm sure there's many, many possibilities. But shall we get into the first cozy thing?
Yeah. Okay. So I've kind of categorized them a bit, and I've started with books because, you know, they're the obvious one. So a cozy thing that I've got really, really into lately as just like my absolute go-to pick me up, or I'm feeling a bit tired, is PG Wodehouse. I feel like this is a fairly obvious cozy thing, but I kind of have like properly discovered him lately. And yeah, I'm listening to the audiobooks on Audible, the like Stephen Fry ones, and they're just, I think in the introduction, Stephen Fry describes his writing as like sunshine in a bottle or something like that. And I feel like that's exactly what they are. Like you can just pick them up from literally anywhere, and before you know it, you're laughing and you just feel really, yeah, comforted. And I just love that world. I love the predictability of it. It's almost like Enid Blyton for adults. There's something about like knowing exactly where every story is going to go. You just need that sometimes, and I'm enjoying it.
Oh, that is so fun. Yeah, my husband, he adores these books, and he says that like he loves that at the end of the day, kind of no matter the scrapes that they get into, like he knows overall things are going to be okay. Yeah. Even though they can be kind of painful. And yeah, Stephen Fry as a narrator is so lovely. And then I feel like the TV adaptations with him and Hilary were really successful at translating, you know, the books into a TV series.
Yeah, I haven't really watched those yet. I feel like I've only kind of recently properly discovered him, but I definitely intend to at some point. I feel like they will be extremely cozy also.
Yes, yeah, they really are. And the woman they have play Aunt Agatha is just, she is supreme.
Excellent. Yeah, I can imagine.
All right, the second thing on your list.
Okay, so then I discovered I had way too many books, and I started to group them. And my second thing is the idyllic summer trope, specifically the like childhood summer in Cornwall trope that you get in a book. I have a few examples. So I've got, these are just like three that I pulled off my shelves, all of which have this is like lovely Cornwall theme. So I've got I don't know how well this will show up, A London Child of the 1870s. I don't know if you've read this one.
I have not. I didn't even know there were some Persephone that were children's books.
So this one isn't a children's book, actually. It's a memoir. But it's like, yeah, so it's a memoir of this Molly Hughes, of her childhood, evidently, in London in the 1870s. And it's really, really lovely. Like, I love those Victorian childhood memoir type books. I could read them endlessly.
Yes.
And this is like beautifully well written, and yeah, has the classic summertime go to stay with a relative in Cornwall in some kind of farmhouse place where someone's always baking. But it's like really nice because it's in contrast to the childhood in the city, which you don't always get so much of in memoirs. Like mostly memoirs are just fully pastoral,
Yes.
which I also love. But yeah, this was a little bit different. And there's actually a couple more in the series after this, which I need to try and find. I don't think Persephone have published them. I think they might be a bit harder to track down. But yeah, this was really good.
Very
anyway,
cool.
Before I talk about that one book for ages, the other one that I had, The Skylark's War, which I think has got a different name in the US. And I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, which isn't particularly helpful, by Hilary McKay. Anyway, this is wonderful, really, really wonderful. Like recently written children's literature that reads like a classic.
That is just, it's so exciting to discover books like that.
Yeah, and so rare. I read this and I felt like it could have been written mostly. Like obviously they always have a few things where you can tell that they've been written from a more modern perspective in terms of like some of the themes they address and stuff, but mostly it's just really got that classic vibe, and it's based on like, it's specifically based on the fact that this brother and sister always go to Cornwall in their childhood, and then it's kind of about how like the memories of their Cornish summers support them through the First World War, and how all of the characters like cope with the First World War and have this like idyllic Cornwall summer to kind of sustain them and link them together. Really beautiful. Also would highly recommend. And then my last one was, this is a YA book by Laura Wood, who I've been quite into this last year as like a comfort YA writer. And this has got such a nice cover. This is like a coming of age in Cornwall book about this girl who lives kind of in, not in poverty, but she's like not particularly rich, and then a super wealthy family come and stay on an island nearby. It's like very roaring 20s, and she makes friends with them, and it's like a romance. And yeah, also really lovely.
I think I'm really meant to read Laura Wood, because people that I follow within the online book community that like classics, it's kind of a unanimous that they like Laura Wood if they read her. So
yeah, I really enjoyed her books. She manages to do that thing with coming of age where like she gets coming of age. She just points out little things and thoughts and feelings that are associated with that time where you're like, yes, I remember that. And so it doesn't feel generic. Like, yeah, it doesn't feel generic in the way that some books can do.
Very cool. Adding to my TBR, I think The Skylark's War sounds like a great one for middle grade March. So
yes, it really would be. I'll look up what the American title is for it, because I remember finding out it had a different title. And yeah, I can't remember what it is.
And I'll make sure to put both titles in the description box. What is the third cozy thing on your list?
Okay, so slightly book related. This is a poet. The specific poet is called Patience Strong. I have no idea have you heard of her?
I have not.
But I think I'm gonna read one of her poems to like give an idea of the style of poetry that it is. It's that like, in my head, I think of it as like old-fashioned Instagram poetry, like 1930s, 40s, 50s kind of moral poetry. It's not like, as poetry, it's not that good, but I find it really, really comforting. And she has like, there's like a calendar of her stuff, and my mum buys it for me for Christmas every year. And they just have these kind of encouraging poems that you get every month. And
how cool.
So this specific little book I really love as well. It was my grandma's, and it's just like really gorgeous, little black and white photos. And so like, for example, one of her poems is called The Sunshine House, and it says, "Make your house a sunshine house and open windows wide. When the air is fresh and fragrant, let it get inside. Do not shut it out, but let it blow into your room, bringing in the sound of songbirds and the scent of bloom. Even though you're living where there's a grey and gloomy view, you yourself can be a window that the sun gleams through. Make your life a house of sunshine, cheery, bright and gay, a life that shines and gives out light to all who pass your way."
See, I really, really like that. And it feels, I am a novice at reading poetry. And so I like that it feels very accessible and just kind of Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I really love them. They're just like so inspirational, and sometimes it's lovely to read poetry and think about it and analyze it, but it kind of reminds you of how much motivation and joy and beauty just like even like simple words can give you. Yeah, so that was my third cozy thing.
Oh, very lovely. And what is your fourth cozy thing?
Okay, fourth cozy thing and last of the one on books is books in which we see ourselves. I was struggling to give a title to this, but like books which feel like mirrors of you, of your soul. So I chose, obviously this will be like super different for different people, but I chose some for me, which are they all children's books? Yeah, kind of mostly children's books. So I've got the Emily series from Ellen Montgomery.
Oh.
Also, this one was a recommendation from you. Also, the Emily of Deep Valley.
I am filled with so much delight. It makes me emotional, honestly, thinking that there are so many people reading this book alongside me, and especially because it's not spoken of as much, and that I'm going to get to discuss it with people. Oh, yes, it will just be magical. This is for my, in case anyone did not see it, I am running a Kindred Spirits Club. And around once a month, we're going to be reading a book together. So Emily of Deep Valley was the first pick, and I was so excited that you were joining me, Ray.
Yeah, I can't wait, honestly. And I enjoyed it so much. And then the third one I had was The Country Child, which I think you read the other month.
Yes.
And for me, they represent like these slightly more serious, imaginative children and young adults who like see and experience a lot of beauty in the world, but aren't necessarily that Anne Shirley-esque about it. Like they don't necessarily scream and shout about it, but they like really feel it deep inside, which is quite similar to the way that I experience the world. And like in the Emily series, there's this one scene in the second book, I think, where she's gone out with her best friend and they're lying on a haystack as the sun sets, and her friend falls asleep and Emily's there by herself, like seeing all of this beauty alone. And there's this line where she says about how she's really glad that she was alone, even though she like clearly loves her best friend, but she kind of needed to be alone for that moment of beauty because it was so kind of spiritually uplifting and enriching that she couldn't imagine spending it with anyone else. And I think it's kind of perfect for the Kindred Spirits book club, because I guess it's those books in which you see kindred spirits like as quite a quiet child that's not necessarily the kind of child that is shown in films and even in books and isn't like noticed in the classroom and kind of praised in society in general. And so those books where you meet your kindred spirits and you're like, oh, that person is like me, I think that's just so cozy and comforting and also really important.
Yes, and it is I don't even know if it's necessarily extroverts versus introverts so much as people who really kind of take and internalize all of those feelings very deeply. Kind of almost feel things more keenly. And to see that. So I really like this kind of seeing yourself in a book. I will be pondering this.
So that was, what were we up to? 4. Okay.
4, yes. All right.
So on to the fifth one. Now I have films or movies. I'm kind of sticking stubbornly to the word films, even though like everyone in the UK is starting to say movies, because I like the idea of being the sort of old person who has like slightly dated language.
So I didn't realize this, that typically in the UK, they've just been referred to as films.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and I feel like it's quite recently, like only in the last few years, everybody's just started calling them movies. I think like funny. Netflix and I don't know, whatever the US influence has like finally worked with that word. And not very many people call them films anymore, but like my whole life, pretty much that's just what everybody refers to them as. So the first one, I pondered whether to put this on because I was watching your old, like the cozy things chats you've had with people before, and I think particularly the one you had was with Katie, the most recent one that you put up. She said any Cinderella adaptation, And I'm totally on board with that. I have a Cinderella adaptation, which is one of my cozy things, which is not one of the ones that you mentioned with Katie, so I thought I would share it. Anyway,
yes.
The Slipper and the Rose.
This is from the 80s, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The costumes in this are fabulous.
So it's like, to me, it's kind of always been my mum and my our like go-to comfort film when you just want to totally switch off. And it's been really hard to get hold of. We had it like recorded off TV on a VHS for ages. You know, when you watched it so many times that there were like bits of it where the tape was starting to get worn out.
Yes.
And then I've got this random version that they bought for me off eBay, which like came free in a newspaper at some time, and then somebody sold it on. But you cannot access it. I think you can even maybe get it on Amazon now, which is great. But I just love the language in it. It has really hilarious songs with like, it uses loads of really high flying vocabulary. As a child, I genuinely didn't understand about 50% of what the songs were about. And yeah, I just think I think there's something about the Cinderella story. I was reflecting on this and why so many people mention Cinderella story as their cozy thing. And I think it's just the pure escapism of the story, but also like kind of mirroring Cinderella's ball experience. Like there is nothing cozier than just completely removing yourself from your life. And for some reason, putting yourself into the Cinderella story really does that for you. It just like totally transports you. And yeah, I love that.
Oh, yes. And I think also because getting to see the different stages of the story, you know, it depends on the adaptation that it is, but she is wealthy in the beginning. And so you get to see her kind of fall from grace, so to speak. And then so that, you know, riches to rags to riches again, but her showing grace and dignity and kindness throughout all of that is really, you can apply it to any situation that's, you know, that you feel is a hard situation you're going through.
Yeah, it's great. It's just such a lovely story. And that adaptation for me that's the cozy one.
Oh, lovely. That's fun to hear a different adaptation that isn't talked about as often. But
yeah, that's why I mentioned it, because I was like, Cinderella's been talked about, but I want to get this one out there and recommend it to people because I really, really like it.
Yes. And the last that I checked, at least in the US, it was available on Amazon Prime. So for anyone watching, if you are interested, you could check on Amazon Prime to see.
Highly recommend. And then my next one is another slightly underrated within something that's quite largely talked about, so it's glaring. Whisper of the Heart, which is a Studio Ghibli
that I have never heard of.
That you've never heard of. And I really am surprised as to why this one is not talked about more in the book community, because it's a really bookish story. So basically the premise is there's this young girl, she's like 13 or something, and she's spending her whole summer in the library. She loves reading, she loves translating music into Japanese, and she realizes that this same guy's name is in all of the library books that she's taking out of the library, like he's read all of them before her, and then it's like a romance based on that. So yeah, it's really, really lovely. It's really whimsical. As you can tell, it's like a lot about the imagination, a lot about kind of finding yourself and following your passion, and loads of like appreciation of art and of writing, and of like the hardship of being 13, 14 and not really knowing what to do with your life. And I watched this a lot as a teenager, and yeah, it just really resonated, and I thought it was really beautiful, and I love it. So I don't really know why this is like the Studio Ghibli that people seem to miss out, because it's kind of screaming to be a book community favorite, in my opinion.
That sounds so lovely. I'm going to be looking that up immediately. And you know what? It jogged my memory. Have you heard of the series, The All of a Kind Family?
No. Oh, maybe, but
it's a Jewish family in, I think it's Brooklyn in the early 1900s. And it is just, it's full of so much goodness. And there's 4 girls in the first book, and then a little boy is born. And the father is so happy to finally have a son. But one of the plot points is at the library, this boy keeps just admiring, just he is utterly enamored with this oldest daughter that he's never spoken to, but he just knows they're meant to be. And she keeps taking one book out at the library. I forget what book it is. But he sees her every day take this book out. So he finally works up the courage to write a note to her, and he puts it in the book. But the plot twist is that every day she wants this book to be there for her. So she files the book in the wrong spot. Because she doesn't, because I think it's maybe something like Anne of Green Gables that is well known and other people would want.
Right.
And so he puts the note in the book and puts it back in the wrong spot. The librarian comes along and says, "What is this book doing here?" And she pulls it out and finds the note, and then she puts it back in the wrong spot so that the note will be received.
That's the most wholesome, lovely.
Yes, yeah, it's a really sweet series, and it's cool too because most books that are from that era are very like the characters are all like wasps. And do you know that term?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's neat to see this very different experience, and they don't celebrate Christmas. You get to hear about Passover, so it's a very cool series.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. Anything that involves library romances,
right?
It's into a winner.
Yes, yes. All right, so are we on to number 5 or 6?
I think we're on to number 7, according to my list.
This is flying by.
Yeah, it is flying by, isn't it? Okay, last film is about time.
I love this movie so much.
I also love it so much. So for people who haven't heard of it, the premise is, I feel like actually one of the things I love about it is that I feel like the premise almost has no bearing on why I love the story.
Absolutely.
So there's this guy, he's 21. I feel like the premise makes it sound a bit rubbish actually, but there's this guy, and when he's 21, he discovers that he can go back in time to any point in his life and like redo something if it's gone wrong. And he kind of uses this like superpower to try and win the girl that he's in love with. But what I love about it so much, it's just like, it's so quirky, and it's so much about like what it means to live a life well. And it's just his life in many ways is so normal, and it doesn't at any point pretend that it's worth striving for anything more than a life where you marry someone you love and you spend time with your parents because you love them and they're great people, and you have children, and you and your partner enjoy spending time with the children. And it's just so focused on the mundanities of life, which is why the whole time travel thing feels a bit random.
Right.
But I think I almost feel like somebody just wanted to make a film that was purely lovely, and then felt like they had to also add in some kind of twist to make it marketable. And so they're like, okay, let's go with time travel.
Yeah, it's like slice of life time travel. And so I think because, like you said, they needed to make it marketable, but that's not really done. Time travel can kind of take over the plot, but it's very much kind of this side element to it. And it's the same people that made Love Actually and Four Weddings and a Funeral. So if you like the humor and heart in those, you will love About Time. Yeah,
it's just it makes you laugh out loud and it makes you cry. And films like that, always wonderful. And then at the end, you just feel really uplifted and ready to like make the most out of every day in your life, which is such a gift.
And be like, I'm just going to keep in mind, I don't know what the cashier at the store that I'm going to, I don't know what kind of day they've had before they came into work. Like, don't make their day worse.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really love it.
All right, number 8.
So onto ones which are just more like general cozy things. Number 8, I have Storms and Bad Weather. So basically, any weather that makes you feel like it's really legitimate that you just stay inside and read and cozy up. I love that. I feel like when it's sunny, like I do love the sunshine, and I often stay indoors anyway when it's sunny. That's one of the nice things about living in Congo, actually. But when you're in the UK, if it's a really nice day, it's so rarely a really nice day that you feel obliged to go out and about in it. And if you're just in the mood to curl up and cozy inside, then sometimes you don't want to. But when it's a rainy day, there's like all the excuses are already there for you. And I love the sound of rain, just like rain on a roof. I'll listen to ASMR rain background sound on repeat when I'm just going about my day anyway. And yeah, I find them so cozy.
Oh, that is lovely. Yeah, that it is, like you said, you have a legitimate excuse to be going inside and reading. It's lovely.
Yeah.
All right.
And then number 9.
Yeah, sorry. Number 9.
Do you want to say anything else about the storms?
No, you're good.
Number 9 is vaguely similar. So I've got train travel.
Oh.
And I think it's that similar thing about like being in a space where you don't feel obliged to do anything. Like I really enjoy traveling in general because you're kind of in this liminal space where nobody is expecting anything of you because you're going somewhere, like you're already doing a thing. But while you're doing that thing, you get to just sit and do whatever you want. And train travel in particular, I mean, it has so many connotations of like old books, storybooks and Victorians and Harry Potter and loads of things like that, which makes it lovely in and of itself. But it's also just something that I've done loads of around the country at various points in my life. And particularly, I think the thing that really made it super cozy for me is when I was working and dating my now fiance. I was living in Cambridge and he was living in London, which is like an hour's train ride away. And so I used to go and see him at the weekend every weekend. And my job was really, really hard and exhausting. But then when it got to Friday night and I got on the train, that was like the moment where work ended and like the weekend and joy began. And I've always made a point of not working on a train. It's like however much work I had to do, a train is like a sacred space in which the work does not happen. And I read or I journal mostly, which I think is quite weird. I don't think many people journal on public transport, but it's like my best journaling space. There's something about, just being in this in-between place that taps into another kind of zone in my mind, I guess. And I really love it.
Oh, that is all so lovely. And I do think kind of train travel is probably more common in the UK than it is in the States. And the public trains are very much like there's many delays and there was one time my husband and I, we went to Princeton just to like stay in the town where Princeton is. And it was lovely, but on the way home, we sat on the train for literally 3 hours while it was delayed.
Really?
Yes. So, but the couple times that I've traveled with Amtrak, which is like the private company, of course, it's just been really lovely and that very relaxing, calming experience that,
I mean, they're a bit of a gamble. Like even in the UK, sometimes they're absolutely rammed and you have to stand and like they do get delayed, generally not that badly delayed, but which kind of makes it all the nicer when you get a train ride, which is nice. You like really appreciate it.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes sense. But now I did have one very idyllic experience too, or it was a couple times that I did it, but I went to Russia 2 different summers and we landed in Moscow and we went to Lipetsk. So we got on an overnight train and, you sleep all night. And I think it's very soothing to be on a train to sleep.
I really like it too.
Yes. And then we woke up in the countryside and there are these babushkas like selling their goat's milk on the side of the train tracks. And you just look out and it's just this beautiful countryside. And they brought tea and cookies first thing. So that was a really nice one.
That sounds really, really lovely. Yeah, overnight trains just make you feel like you're in a storybook.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I really do hope more train travel is in my future. Once all of this craziness has passed over, I would love to do more traveling by train.
Yeah, yeah.
So are
Um,
we to 10?
we're to 10. We're to the last one. And my last one, I chose something which is incredibly obvious to say on this platform, but also I feel like it's brought so much coziness to my life since I discovered it that I did want to give it a shout out. It's just Booktube in general. Like, I feel like it's kind of pivoted my perspective on so many things. Like, I've met so many lovely people, and I've met so many people who are really like-minded and who've made me realize that things I enjoy doing, like this, like having a talk about cozy things, is actually something that other people also love doing. And yeah, it's just like watching people on Booktube is such a cozy, comforting part of every day. I particularly love reading vlog type videos where you just see people
Oh,
going about their daily life. I figured this out years ago. I figured out that my favorite kind of thing to watch on TV were generally period dramas in which not very much happens, very little goes wrong, and it all turns out fine in the end.
yes.
And that's what a reading vlog is. Like, it's like that, but with books.
So true. Yes, it's so
Yeah,
true. And
I
I
think,
think there is this real feeling when you find Booktube and you are a reader and you see all of these people that their ideal day would be, would be to stay at home with a book and a delicious beverage and be as cozy as possible. And that you're just like, I found my people.
yeah,
Um, and to see also people get emotional about the stories that move them. I
yes.
remember before, it was this common phrase I would hear from girls who I was just like, we are not the same type of person. And I would express my feelings like, oh, I loved this book so much, or, this movie, and with too much enthusiasm. And they would say, you're so funny, which what they meant was, you're so weird, but they were trying to make it sound nicer. And so I just love the sincerity of just the delight that everyone takes in the stories that they're loving on Booktube.
Yeah, yeah. And it just kind of, I feel like it influences your reading journey in such a positive way. Like, a lot of the books that I read now, like the kind of books that we've been talking about that we say is our crossover, those like life softening books I would have read before, but maybe felt a little bit ashamed that those were the kind of books I liked, and I should be reading like really cool, trendy literary fiction that I didn't really understand, and it made me miserable because everything was just bad the whole way through. And it's so nice to find a community of people who like really celebrate the things that bring you joy.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I know when I first had my channel, I was trying to do more of those, the popular literary fiction. And I have had once in a blue moon. It's just this magic thing that happens and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, yeah, eventually you just kind of give up on forcing it. And I'm like, if people think it's kind of a little too indulgent that I continue just to go right for these books, then that's what they think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for doing this Cozy Things chat, and I cannot wait for everyone to see it.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really, really lovely.